You're listening to the Quint podcast.
Day 2 of the Boxing Day test was all about one man, Ajinkya Rahane, India's captain for the rest of the series. After some impressive bowling choices and field placements on day 1, Rahane scored India's first century of the series at the MCG, the first century of the series, in fact. I guess Ayaz Memon is with us. Ayaz, how great has Rahane been?
Vendra, I think this is a career-defining innings for him. I mean, it could be a series-defining knock, a century by Rahane, because India have got a fairly good lead already and 5 wickets remaining now, unless they collapse in a heap on the third day. But even so, I think the manner in which India recovered from the mauling in the Adelaide Test, I think was quite very impressive. And the man at the centre of it all has been Rahane. First with his captaincy when Australia were batting, and now with his batting when India were under some pressure in the first session with the Australian bowling looking very hostile. Now, when I say career-defining, it's because he has been, Ajinkya Rahane has been amongst the most talented players that have emerged from Mumbai in the last decade, along with Rohit Sharma, as we know. He's got a fantastic record in domestic cricket. He had a very good start into international cricket, made a mark in all 3 formats, and then suddenly, things started going haywire for him. His career seemed to lose its sheen, its multifacetedness. He's out of the ODI team, he's out of the T20 team, and he had almost become a marginal player even in the Test team. So this could be a knock which gives him a second wind, because he is, everybody knows that he's extremely good in defense, in attack. He's a guy who can make big, tall scores. It was just a matter of, I think, regaining confidence, and he just seems to have come into his own because he's the man in charge.
I'm Menra Dorji.
And I'm Ayaz Memon.
And you're listening to the Aussie Challenge Podcast on the Quint, powered by Farm Easy and MediBuddy.
Okay, I'm going to quickly take you through the scores. India started the day at 36 for 1 with Shubman, Gill and Pujara at the crease. Gill was the first to go out to Cummins, 5 runs short of his half century. Pujara fell 2 overs later, also to Cummins on 17. Gill's departure brought in Ajinkya Rahane, who played a complete captain's knock, first adding 52 runs with Hanuma Vihari to stabilise the innings, then a quick-fire 57 with Rishabh Pant, and then finally completed the day with a successful third session with Ravindra Jadeja, where no wickets were lost and 88 runs were scored. Rahane also scored his 12th Test century as India were 277 for 5 at stumps on day 2, leading Australia by 82 runs. Now, Ayaz, starting again with Rahane, when you say, rising up to the occasion, this is what the terms almost certainly means, doesn't it? What a great calm knock by him. Also, innings that sort of changed pace according to his batting partners.
Yes, look, I think he's a very cultured player, stroke player. He's got a very good tight defense. And once he gets going, he can be very attractive to watch also. So Rahane is actually, and if you remember, Rahane actually made his mark and came into the Indian team because of his performances in T20 cricket, in the IPL. So it's not that he does not relish white ball cricket. In fact, he was amongst the better known white ball practitioners in the Indian cricket circuit or on the circuit, and then got into Test cricket, proved his mettle there. Somewhere he seems to have had a crisis of confidence for various reasons. Maybe he should have got more support when he was not doing well. These things can happen depending on what the environment is, what the personality is like. I think he's had a bit of an inner struggle, if I might put it that, to come to terms, and therefore you saw a string of modest or mediocre scores, and people were wondering whether does he still deserve a place? Is he keeping somebody else more talented out from the team? And these are not good thoughts to carry with you when you're going around, and especially when you're the vice captain. And now in this case, of course, he's been the captain. Earlier he was vice captain to Virat. But I think, he seized the moment today. This was a tough assignment for Rahane, the match itself. He seized the moment by captaining quite superbly yesterday in the manner in which he changed his bowlers, he shuffled his bowlers around, the field placing. And then again today, when India was in a spot of bother, having lost Gill and Cheteshwar Pujara. And imagine if Rahane had not to make the runs that he made today, India wouldn't be sitting on a fairly impressive lead. In fact, it's more likely that India may have conceded a lead to Australia, though Australia had made only 195. So this is an innings of great character. It's a confidence shot. It's a booster for Rahane, for the Indian team. And I think in the larger context, it has serious ramifications for how his own career is going to shape up from here. As indeed, as I mentioned at the start, maybe how the series pans out from here.
We're of course seeing a lot of praise for Rahane from a lot of foreign former players. Ricky Ponting, who's his coach at the Delhi T20 franchise, has said a lot of nice things about him. Said even though Rahane didn't play the whole season, he was always there in practice on time, giving it his 100th, always helping others. You of course are also from the same city as Rahane. What's the kind of reputation he has in the local Mumbai circles?
I think, he enjoys a very high reputation amongst fellow cricketers, especially for Mumbai, for two reasons. And I've met Rahane on several occasions. I've also interviewed him a few times for television and stuff. He's a very, I think he's humble to a fault. He's just so down to earth, and sometimes you wonder, because if you look at the Indian cricket scenario over the last 5-7 years and you talk of batting stars, there's obviously Kohli, there's Rohit, there's Pujara, and then there's Rahane. And somewhere in this, in this foursome, he seemed to be, he seemed to have slipped below the radar. While actually, I think he's got, if you look at his domestic accomplishments, they're fantastic. And when you speak to him, you realize how earnest he is. I think that's really the word I would use to describe him. He has got a lot of cricket knowledge. He's not, he's not a charismatic guy. He's not a guy who will compel your attention by the manner in which he talks or the way he walks and all that kind of stuff. But he's got a very good head on his shoulders where cricket matters are concerned. That's reflected in his captaincy. And also he's a very, very sound player who seemed to have got into a bit of a crisis of confidence. And I for one, I'm absolutely delighted to see him back the way he did today, because this is the kind of innings which will raise his, morale and his stature and give him that little, boost of self-belief, which perhaps he had been lacking in the last couple of years.
We talked about the bowling decisions and, the field placements that Rahane made yesterday, but today about his batters. Shubman Gill made 45, Pant got out on 29, and then there's all-rounder Jadeja, who's unbeaten on 40 and batting with him. So, his selection decisions regarding the batters he wanted to use also going his way so far?
Yes, I think, look, there was so much criticism about the changes made and why should Pant play or why should Jadeja play and why not so and so and why not so and so. I think sometimes people on the outside end up, thinking perhaps that they're wiser than everybody else, but it doesn't. When a team performs well, then everybody goes in for hasty revision of opinion. I think that, look, there are 2 or 3 things which have emerged from this batting performance, apart from Rahane's masterclass. One is that Shubman Gill is a find, but he needs to be tighter, more compact in his stroke selection. You can be a little flashy and it'll look good when it comes off, but it could also cost the team dear if it doesn't come off. So that's something that, and he's very stylish, very good to watch, but he needs to tighten up because you want an opener to play a long innings. Then there is Pant. I think Pant's cameo was important to the extent that he tamed the Australian bowlers when, in the second session when it looked like they were not letting go of the stranglehold. So though he made only 29, they came in good time and he hit them all over the park. So it's a battle of nerves that Pant helped win. And then there's Jadeja, who's essentially a bowler who's also a batsman. And he's, over the last couple of years, he's improved by leaps and bounds where his batting is concerned. We've seen that even in the IPL, where his bowling didn't seem to be that effective, but his batting was very effective. And he's been making these big scores to suggest that he can command a place at number 5, number 6 or number 7 on his batting ability alone. His bowling then becomes very effective if you have a wearing pitch, a 4-day pitch or a 5-day pitch. So I think all the selections seem to have been justified as the innings has progressed. Of course, nothing works like success. So I think the partnership between Rahane and Jadeja has been very crucial. It helped India get past the first innings, get the first innings lead, which is a very big psychological boost. And after that, he didn't get down to playing some loose shots. He stuck to his, he stuck his ground, and he just decided that he wants to partner his captain and see the day through. Whatever the number of runs you make, he can also tonk the ball long distances, but he held himself in check, which I think is quite a commendable job done by Jadeja.
Okay, tough to make predictions right now, but India are leading by 82 runs. They're at 277 for 5. Small prediction, do you think Jadeja will manage a half century considering he's on 40 right now?
I hope he does, and then we'll see that typical gesture of his once he reaches a landmark or a milestone. Like the sword, he kind of which has become quite popular. But I think more importantly, Mendra, I think what needs to happen is for India to bat out at least one session tomorrow. If they can do that, then the lead swells to about 150, 160, which then becomes formidable because the onus, the pressure on Australia will be humongous. Remember, if India get bowled out very early tomorrow and the lead is, from 83, it goes to about 110, 120, India have to bat last on this pitch, and it could get dicey, it could get tricky. So they don't want to be chasing, I think, more than 150, 160 on this pitch. And therefore, if the longer they bat, there's more wear and tear for them, then they can bowl out Australia in the third innings that much quicker. I think if they bat a session, they'll probably get another 70, 80 runs. And that'll be really good. There'll be a big load on Australia to overcome.
Okay, I'm going to end the podcast here. Thank you so much, Ayaz, for joining us today.
Thank you, Mendra. Bye-bye.
And thank you all for listening to the Aussie Challenge Podcast with Ayaz Memon on the Quint, powered by Farm Easy, India's largest online pharmacy and MediBuddy.
Thanks for listening. Log on to the Quint's website and check out our other podcasts